Agent 4, this is the last of your pre-selected case studies. Case file, 6-9 Mike Whiskey. Status, closed. Registered by, Agent 7. Registry date, redacted. The Bureau was alerted to anomalous activity by a third-class agent embedded in Kent County, Texas, working as a therapist. Her report stated that otherwise good-natured individuals experience drastic personality changes, often becoming hostile, and in some cases these changes resulted in assault and murder. Affected individuals usually return to their original state soon after performing acts of violence or cruelty, albeit traumatized by their actions while under the effects of the anomalous change. Due to his expertise in the occult, Agent 7 was assigned to the case despite having a prior engagement in another case. He made contact with the third-class agent the next day and was briefed on the mission. Agent 7 made a formal complaint about the unorthodox method of mission briefing. The complaint was filed under 6-9 Mike Whiskey Addendum 1. Mission report is as follows.
The therapist was ecstatic about meeting a first-class agent. The lack of professionalism was gut-churning. I could not wait to get out of her office and begin the investigation. As soon as the briefing was over, I walked a few blocks away to a motel. The briefing mentioned room 104 was the scene of a crime, committed by the first subject of my investigation, Maria Dawson. Apparently she had assaulted her ex-boyfriend here. I rented the room, and as soon as I opened the door to the room, I knew this case was going to be an ugly one. The official term would be sensing traces of a malignant presence, but it was more like I was assaulted by an ethereal shitstorm right off the bat. Whoever is listening to this report, respectfully sir, fuck this job and fuck my life. You need to find another occult specialist to handle some of these cases. My mind is a latrine of supernatural shit at this point. I need some downtime between these cases. Anyway, I spent the rest of the day carving runes around the room, and began a standard contact ritual. It took the better part of an hour before I felt a response, distant at first and barely noticeable, but rapidly closing the distance. It was fast enough that I was almost too late to shield myself, but I did manage to conjure a barrier before the impact. Once its attack was over, the entity presented itself in a loosely humanoid form. It was angry that I kept it at bay, but there was a pang of morbid curiosity at the edge of its presence. It was a newly formed level 2 curse. My lack of fear confused it. I stood up from my chair and energized the runes, activating the trap. I would have prepared a purge spell if I knew how strong this thing was, but I did not and was in for an unpleasant surprise. For future reference, I'd like to avoid assignment to cases where I am asked to trap such entities. As per protocol, I asked, "What are you?" and it replied, "Fury," as it lunged at me. I was assuming it to be much less powerful than what I experienced and my concentration was broken. The trap fell apart as it broke through and I was left with a drained mind. The source of the malignant traces had returned and further contaminated the room with its presence. The air was rank with it, the anger alone was choking me. I opened a vial of HT, dropped it on the ground, and left the room. As I smoked a cigarette outside, and waited for the room to be cleansed, I rode the unpleasant high of the entity's power, hoping it would fade away quickly. Usually contact with a level 2 is a walk in the park, but this one was different. As the artificial anger continued to wash over me, I noticed another emotion, hidden under the anger. Sadness. I grabbed my briefcase and walked to the nearby diner. There was detective work to be done. This thing was a complex construct of emotions. It was not a curse, but the projection of a magically active individual's will. I had suspected a traumatic event had caused Maria Dawson's anger and spite to manifest itself as a curse and haunted the town. She was not the source, but the first victim of a yet unknown assailant. I decided to work my way from her to the latest incident and find a pattern. Whoever the source of this projection was, they must have had a motive. The diner proved to be a decent study for my investigation. Ample coffee and bacon with few customers to bother me. I spent several hours poring over the files and had a few ideas about how to solve this case. Maria Dawson, 32. Her ex-boyfriend Jason Garcia had left her for a younger woman. A week after the breakup, Maria forced her way into room 104, where Jason and his younger girlfriend were together, and attacked Jason with a baseball bat, breaking his jaw, left arm and several ribs. Thomas Moore, 26. His boss, Richard Lee, had always been mistreating him. Following 4 years without incident, just 2 days after Maria Dawson's attack, Thomas Moore shot his boss 6 times in the head before closing their auto repair shop for the night. Matthew Carter, 45. He was found crying by the mutilated corpse of his childhood friend, Arthur Hughes, 3 days after the previous incident. He confessed to the crime. His trial was ongoing at the time of this report. Nicole Evans, 15. She initiated a fight with another female student at school grounds. Her victim, Emma Edwards, had mild injuries but recovered quickly. This incident took place the day following the murder of Arthur Hughes. Aaron Foster, 30. He drove his vehicle into a coffee shop on Main Street on the same day as the school incident. 4 people were killed and 2 were injured. He had reportedly been stuck inside the vehicle following the incident and kept trying to get out, shouting at his wife, who owns the shop, with threats of violence. Someone or something connected these events, so I left the diner to interview the local residents. Most of the information I gathered was unrelated, but just as the therapist had said, these people were known to be passive and easygoing individuals. No one could believe they really did those things. When I was about done interviewing Aaron Foster's wife in her home, the doorbell rang. I thanked her for her time, and got up to leave. As I neared the door, I felt the presence of the projection again. My hand went for my weapon, and I readied myself as Mrs. Foster opened the door. A middle-aged man with scars all over his body and face was standing outside. Mrs. Foster smiled at him, but his face did not change. I stepped closer and felt the malicious presence strengthen. This was undoubtedly unstable magical power. I was certain he was the culprit. Just as I was about to draw my weapon, he called a boy's name, Todd, and his face softened, and the projection's presence faded. A prepubescent boy appeared with a bottle of milk in his hands. Mrs. Foster paid the man and thanked them both. As I was about to leave, I asked who they were, and she said he was an unlucky man that the town tried to help by buying his dairy products. I was intrigued, more by the presence of my quarry when he was around than by his misfortune, but I asked her to tell me more, and walked back into her guest room. I learned his name was John Freeman, a former deputy for the local sheriff. His scars were from his last act as a deputy. He had saved teenagers from a bear attack, which put him in a hospital for a while. He had survived only to be shunned by the locals, due to his new haggard look. His wife left him and he was left with a toddler on his own. His left leg had gone lame, and the sheriff did not want a crippled man looking like a freak show serving under him, so he was left without a job too. Money was put together to help him get back to his life, but people usually avoided him. I asked if he sold his products to the other people or families involved in the incident, and she said yes. I thanked Mrs. Foster for her time once more, and left with directions to this man's house. He had a property just outside town. When I arrived, I could see the boy, Todd, milking a cow in the backyard. I walked to the door of the house, and knocked. John Freeman was not surprised to see me, and ushered me in with distaste. His answers to my questions were short and to the point. His face never betrayed any emotion. When my questions were done and I still remained seated, he knew that I knew. He stated that I did not show him a badge before entering the house. I explained that where I work there are no badges. I then told him that with time and training his condition can be put to better use, but he had to cooperate with me. He smiled at first, then chuckled. He told me I have the wrong guy, and made some remarks about my skills of deduction that I care not to repeat in this report. I then felt the presence again, and shot up to my feet with my weapon drawn. I informed him that I am trained in magical arts, and can not only defend myself, but can fight his power back too. He only laughed as he slowly rose to his feet, and I saw a glint of the entity in his eyes. This was wrong, it was a projection, he could not be possessed by his own projection. I saw the boy standing in the doorway to his room in the back, and I realized I had to make a decision. John Freeman was about to attack me, he was either the source of the projection, and killing him would wrap this case up, or he was the latest victim of his own son, and shooting him would solve nothing. But this was advanced magic that required time to master. How could a child command such power? I had no time to think, and I made my decision. I reached for the magically charged rune necklace I wore, snapped it loose, and slammed it into the man with my open palm. The projection was cast out violently, and the boy was thrown back with it. Todd was furious, he collected himself, and used his projection to attack me. I used the rune to fight it off, and though Todd was powerful, my trained mind proved stronger, and I overcame him. As I closed the distance between us, I noticed his thoughts in my own mind. It was involuntary telepathy, his cry for help. I knelt beside him, and touched his shoulder in an effort to comfort him. I saw through his memories, how his father was abusive and negligent. John was the outcast, but also a good listener to whoever wished to visit him. People told him about their troubles, and expressed their frustrations. Because that's all the friendship he had, John talked and complained constantly about other people's worries. Todd needed a father that was not always so bitter and angry, one that had the time and energy for him. He in turn became a bitter kid, and his power manifested to fix the root of his problem. No more angry visitors, no more angry dad. This is when I activated my beacon, and handed the boy over to another occult specialist. I recommend the Bureau not to consider him for recruitment in the future. He is unlikely to be agent material.